Hello and welcome to the Game Dev Meetup 85. In this meetup, we'll have one presentation, and the presenter will be from USA, Gunnar Clovis, and he will tell us about making small games to amplify your design skills. So this will be a 30-minute presentation, and I hope you will learn something. So, Gunnar, you can start.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. So, let's say you want to make a game. You get on your computer, you do some Googling, give the information that you're interested in game dev to everyone, because you don't have Surfshark or NordVPN or ExpressVPN running, so you probably see this guy about 10,000 times and learn that coding your own games is easier than you think. You download your engine of choice, or just whichever one is free, which, if we're honest, is probably Unity. Maybe you follow that Udemy course, or you do a YouTube tutorial. Maybe you complete a couple test projects to start to learn the engine. Then you set off on creating your game. It's going to be the best game ever, inspired by all your favorites, like Minecraft and Skyrim and World of Warcraft and Pokemon and Final Fantasy and Fortnite and whatever is currently relevant. It's going to be an epic RPG or MMO or Battle Royale or some combination of the three. Based on those tutorials you kind of watched, you figure it will take a couple months. 3 months go by. You're not done. You had a lot more ideas, and it ended up being a bit slower than you thought. You need a few more months. Then 6 months go by. A year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And at some point along the way, real life gets in the way. Or, more likely, you just get frustrated and lose motivation and give up. Quit game development. By the fact that you're listening to this presentation right now, you haven't given up on game dev entirely, and thus probably haven't been through this cycle, at least not in full. However, this is a very common narrative. If you spend any significant amount of time around game dev communities, you've likely heard it before. It's a common pitfall to overscope, for veteran developers, and especially for beginners. And who can blame them? We all get into game development due to our love and passion for the medium. We love games. They hold a special place in our hearts, defining our childhoods or relationships or best memories or some other important period in our life. We dream of creating our own, maybe to relive our best memories, actualize a childhood fantasy, or pass on that experience to a new generation. It's easy to get wide-eyed with the possibilities and lose sight of the difficult reality. I see this exact story I've described constantly. Both online and in person, I've witnessed this exact cycle play out a multitude of times. People start on their dream game, their magnum opus, right out of the gates, not realizing how long and difficult it will be, how much skill and discipline is actually required. So they try and fail, keep trying, until they eventually quit. I've met dozens of different people who have been working on the same RPG Maker RPG for years, 2 years, 5 years, over a decade sometimes. I've literally met multiple groups who have spent over a decade on their own RPG Maker game, just because they really love it, and they're passionate about it, and it's their story, and their magnum opus, and they don't want to give up on it. And honestly, it's so much more unfortunate when those most stubborn stick through development hell, instead of cutting their losses and hopefully trying again later. It really hurts me to see this happen. It really does. It makes me so sad to see someone quit game development just because they didn't have proper guidance and bit off more than they could chew. And again, I don't blame them. It's a tough task, and scoping is very difficult. Even George Lucas, after creating many great films like Labyrinth and Indiana Jones, and of course, revolutionizing the film industry and creating fandom and nerd culture as we know it today with the original Star Wars trilogy, he bit off more than he could chew with the Star Wars prequels. He said so himself. After viewing a rough cut of 1999's The Phantom Menace, Lucas was not pleased with how disjointed it was, how much was thrown at the audience so quickly, the whiplash of swapping between such emotionally disparate scenes so quickly. It was overscoped. It was too much. Too many things with not enough time to breathe or be easily followed. And he couldn't delay the movie for a year to fix it, like was like was done with the first Star Wars movie in 1997, A New Hope, which had very similar problems to The Phantom Menace before it was delayed and reshot and re-edited into what we know today. So there's an alternate timeline not too far from us where the prequels were delayed and got more money and were made rather good. But in our timeline, the prequels were kind of bad, as they were too ambitious, overscoped, and didn't have enough time and money to polish themselves up. Now, does that sound familiar to anyone? And if George Lucas, who at that point was an award-winning veteran filmmaker of several decades who revolutionized his industry, if he could overscope and fail with an overly ambitious project, can we really blame someone for doing the same with their first video game? I don't. However, I don't believe that this narrative is a path that game developers have to follow and overcome. I think there's a better way, and the answer is small games. My name is Gunnar Clovis. I'm a game inventor. I get to say that now. I've been designing and developing video games and card games for many years as a student, then a hobbyist, then professional. I currently work for the UNLV Center for Gaming Innovation in Las Vegas in the United States, designing and developing games for the casino gaming industry, helping patent and sell gaming innovations. I studied video game development for many years, working briefly in that field before pivoting to casino games for the time being. However, I still love the broader field of video game development. I've made well over 100 games of all shapes and sizes, mostly small games, as you might expect. I've worked many game conferences and shows, made game engines from scratch, used lots of different game engines. I've founded and run multiple game development communities, both local and virtual, to mostly great success. I consult occasionally. I used to do a lot of modding. I run the Las Vegas Global Game Jam. I've run lots of game jams, and I produce game dev-related content on YouTube, though that has slowed down in recent months due to current events. My path into game development has been atypical, and is still developing. But I love this industry, this field, and I spend a lot of time educating and sharing what knowledge I may have. And a concept I repeat ad nauseum to my students and people who ask me how to get into game development is to make many, many small games. That's it. That's the thesis of this presentation. It's not a complicated one. Make lots of small games. But let me tell you why. Game development and game design, which are two different things, are skills, like anything. And the more experience you have doing something, generally, the better you are at it. A skill is simply your ability to do something, your expertise. Practice makes perfect, after all. So the more time you spend making games, the better you get at making games. Pretty straightforward. Ah, but Gunnar, you may say, then the person who spends 2 years working on their first game is surely going to get better at making games through that experience. Why make many small games over the same time period when they could simply work towards one big game that will be better and make more money while still gaining the same amount of experience and skill? Destroyed with facts and logic. Yes, if you spend 2 years working on a game, you're going to get better at game development. But this isn't actually always a good thing for your project. That's counterintuitive. But if we look to Fez, a really good puzzle platformer tied to a really great indie game dev documentary that makes me cry a lot, the main creator, Phil Fish, did the game's art. When he started on the project, it was his first time doing pixel art. So, over the course of years, his pixel art skills improved, meaning that the later sprites he made for the game were way better than his early sprites. So, in order for the game to actually look good and cohesive, he had to redo all of his early sprite work in his new, better style, gained with practice and experience. And over the course of that process, his pixel art skills improved further, so he had to do it again. And the cycle repeated a good 5 or so times, where Phil Fish literally had to recreate the game's entire library of art assets over and over again because his skills kept improving. It's a positive feedback loop, and a vicious cycle. Now imagine that positive feedback loop of creator skill for every aspect of a game. You get better with practice and experience, so you have to redo everything over and over with your new knowledge. Your previous sprite sheets, levels, code, music, don't cut it anymore because you've gotten so much better. You're better than your old work. This is how many indie games get stuck in perpetual development hells. Not only do they experience scope creep, but they have to keep redoing things because their creators get more skilled over time. This is a colossal reason as to why I recommend game developers, beginners especially, start with small games. Because you're going to get better with practice and experience, and if you make a small game, you just leave it alone after you finish it. You don't have to redo all of the art or music or levels because the game is done. You instead take your newfound improved skills to your next small game, and the cycle continues. That positive feedback loop is now working in your favor, not against you. But there's another huge reason as to why it's better to make a series of small games instead of just one big game when learning. In my previous hypothetical question for myself, the argument was that if you spend 2 years making one large game versus 2 years making many small games, you're going to get the same increase in skill and experience. But that's not true. If you work on one game for years, you are improving your general skills as a game developer. However, a skill you're not improving, and it's the most important one, is shipping. Shipping, meaning to finish and launch a game, is very difficult. There's an aphorism we have in software engineering here in the US, coined by Tom Cargill of Bell Labs. It's called the 90-90 rule. The first 90% of the code accounts for the first 90% of the development time. The remaining 10% of the code accounts for the other 90% of the development time. The last 10% of a project is the last 90% of a project. This is even more true in game development. Game development is a very complicated creative medium, with a plethora of moving parts. I always like to imagine game development as the best parts of computer science and filmmaking, two fields I adore. Finishing a game is a gargantuan endeavor, even for small games. There's so much that goes into the polishing stages, which, again, we expect to take very little time, but in reality takes almost as much time as the core of a game's development. Bug fixing, final bits of content, polish, last-minute changes and additions, these drag on forever. Shipping games is the most important skill to game development. And how do you improve a skill? With practice and experience. If you spin your wheels on the same large game for weeks, months, or years, you're not actually learning to manage scope or ship a final product. However, if you work on small games and finish them, you will, by their very nature, learn how to ship and manage scope creep. You have to. By making smaller games, you learn how to make better games, and you learn how to make them faster. Making smaller games improves your skills exponentially. If 2 people were to begin game development at the same time, with the same level of skill, passion, drive, and time commitment, where one developed a large game for 6 months, like an RPG, and the other developed a small game in an hour, then a game in 2 hours, a game in 3 hours, a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then a large RPG in 3 months, I believe that the second person, who made many small games leading up to their big RPG, would finish their RPG before the first person who started on it from the outset, and it would be a better game. If we look to reality, the first person would most likely delay their big RPG game, multiple times perhaps, and it might never be finished. I see it time and again. That's my pitch. Making small games improves your skills, including your skills with finishing and shipping better games faster. And it doesn't trap you in the positive feedback loop of constantly having to redo your previous work. I'm not saying you should make small games forever. Of course, we want to build big, complex, ambitious games. I do too, but those ambitious games are hard and time-consuming. It's easier to commit to and stick with a smaller project, and it's faster to get the satisfaction of completing it. I believe for beginning game developers, the best thing you can do for yourself is to make many tiny games over time to prepare for your eventual big release. And for more veteran game developers, remember that small games can be fun and still educational and beneficial, even when you're more experienced. I make a small game or two every week. I make games for a living as my day job, but I still love to make these small games every week and publish them to itch.io, improving my own skills, relieving me of stress, giving me a break from my current bigger project, embedding myself within a community, and allowing me to experiment with new genres and new engines and new types of games that I haven't made before. When you work on one big project, you lose sight of the diversity, the variety that games have to offer. By experimenting with weird, smaller games that I don't have to stress about not working, I can learn new skills and get new ideas from these different genres to apply to my main work. Game jams are a great way to do all this, for both beginners and veterans. As I'm sure you all know, a game jam is an event where developers make a game from start to finish within a specific time frame, usually 48 hours over a weekend. Global Game Jam, Ludum Dare, and the multitudinous game jams hosted on itch.io are all great events. My personal favorite is Trijam. You should all be familiar with this one. Trijam is a weekly game jam hosted on itch.io, run by Rock Knight Studios out of Latvia. It's a 3-hour game jam where you start and finish a game, ideally, within only 3 hours. Pretty self-explanatory. The short time limit is great, as you don't have time to overthink it, or psych yourself out, or procrastinate, as I tend to do with longer jams. I really struggle with month-long, week-long, even 48-hour game jams. I get too wrapped up in my own head, especially when I have teammates. And I procrastinate and get mad at myself for procrastinating, and it's a rather tragic positive feedback loop from there. I tried a profusion of different game jams, and I still do rather love the communities of several of them, like the weekly game jam, which I also really recommend. But the trijam was the first I really stuck to. It works well for me. I can always dredge up 3 hours to spare to make a game really quick, and I bet you could too. Perhaps trijam isn't for you. Everyone is different after all, but I behoove you to try it, at least a couple times. By consistently making a game every week, I've accrued a large library of itch.io game jam games, and several have won their respective jams. This creates a large portfolio for me, though I still need to upload many of my older games. This helps me when improving my experience, helps with job interviews, and again, this is all really fun and satisfying, and improves my skill set. I know you could do the same. If you're a student, or otherwise are just starting out and want to work in games, my best piece of advice is to make many small games that you can finish exponentially quickly, building up a good portfolio for yourself. Game development is an industry where hiring is primarily driven by portfolios in your past work, not your degree. If you take the time consistently each week to build a small game, you'll accrue a huge library of past work before you know it. And if you take the opportunity to experiment with different game engines, then no matter what job you apply for, you'll be able to point to some of your past work done in the studio's relevant engine. And quantity is better than quality in terms of your portfolio, at least for the majority of it. Anyone who'd be looking at your portfolio to hire you isn't going to have the time to download and play through all of your games. They're realistically just going to skim through it, see how many products you've published, at best play the top 1 or 2 games. So if you just put your best foot forward, placing your best games at the top of your portfolio on itch.io or otherwise, then fill the rest with finished products, regardless of how buggy you think they are, you're golden. But also remember, quality comes from quantity. The more games you make, the better the games you make are. And a playable shipped game is infinitely better than a game that would have been amazing if it was ever released. Real, tangible, playable, finished products are infinitely better than incomplete fantasies. That's my wisdom for today. I hope you're able to amplify your game design capabilities with small games like I was. I believe you can. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate the opportunity and your attention. I'm happy to take your questions now, and you can always feel free to reach me on Discord, including through the Trijam Discord, which I run. I hope you and your families are safe and happy. Please love each other and enjoy game development. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. So we have a few questions, and
Absolutely.
yeah. So the first question is: so if somebody wants to build a big RPG game, do you suggest concentrating on many small RPG games or try different genres?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. I do think you should try different genres just because you're going to learn the base skills. Like when I mean, I've taught game development for a very long time, and when I am teaching someone who's brand new, you always want to start with the super basic games. Start with the Atari stuff. Do Pong, because you can make Pong in like 20 minutes if you just follow any tutorial for like any modern game engine. It's very easy. And so that's a really good stepping stone to just introduce you to the concepts of like programming and game engines if you're not familiar with them. And then you step up into, a Pac-Man type game or maybe a Tetris type game, and then maybe a simple 2D platformer. And you slowly build your way up to the more complicated genres because you're learning the skills that are all related, because it's mainly the same skills, right? When you're making a shooter game versus a puzzle game, you're still coding, you're still doing art, you're still doing music, you're still working within a game engine. And so you have to know how to do those things. RPGs are the most complicated type of genre, generally, particularly JRPGs. In that they take the most time to generate a minimum viable product, which is the smallest part of your game that you can make, which is what you want to make. You want to make a minimum viable product as soon as possible, which is what things like prototyping and game jams are really, really great for. And so, yeah, for an RPG, you definitely would want to do like a test smaller RPG before you start on a massive RPG. But I do think generally you should try lots of different genres, because that will teach you the general skills you're going to need, give you new ideas, and just make you a more diverse developer.
And yeah, you're talking about many different games. Do you also suggest trying different tools, like different engines?
Yes, if you have the time. Of course, everyone's different, has different circumstances, and so how much time you can commit to game development, of course, is going to have a big factor on your game development journey. But yeah, I do really, really recommend making small games consistently, as the presentation was about, like every week, every 2 weeks, every month, whatever you can really manage. And if you're doing that, as I said, you're going to build up a really big portfolio of games. If you make a game every week, like you're going to have a lot of finished games before you really know it, in just a matter of like 6 months. And you might as well take that time to experiment with new tools. Of course, this is going to depend on what your goals are, right? If you're a student or a hobbyist and you're looking to get hired within the game industry, it's probably a good idea to learn a diverse set of tools, because then that gives you more options when you're looking for jobs. But if you want to work for like a specific company, which generally isn't the best path, you should keep your options open. Don't get locked into a specific company, because then if you end up that you can't get that for whatever myriad of reasons, then that's really unfortunate. And then you can also have problems where you don't negotiate like the best position due to your really single-minded attachment to the one corporation. But yeah, if you want to just work in games in general at like a bunch of different companies, you don't care so much which one, you just want a good job that's doing something you love, then definitely you can look into what technologies those teams are using. Unity is the most popular game engine by the numbers, particularly within indie game development, because it's free to download and has such a large base. And it's another situation of a positive feedback loop, which is a really common thing. It's one of my favorite things. Positive and negative feedback loops are one of my favorite topics in game design, but you see them all the time. Positive feedback loop is basically just a snowball effect, like as some of the slides were showing, where the more you have of something, it just generates more of that thing. So yeah, it's just like the snowball rolling down the cartoon hill and just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that's the same thing when you're building these games, when you're job hunting, that the more technology you learn, the easier it is to learn new technology, and then it'll be better for you to get those positions. But certainly depend on your goals. Usually I talk to people individually, and I really dig into like, why do you want to work in games? What are your specific goals? And then we try and tailor your path based to you as an individual. So yeah, I definitely did not do it ideally. So again, my path into game development has been atypical. I did not work in the traditional video game industry for very long, only for about like 6 months before I kind of had to move to Las Vegas very suddenly due to personal stuff. And then I moved into the casino game industry, which is different, but also very similar. It's still the main tools like the casinos, like half the casino technology companies use Unity. Again, Unity is just a very, very common engine. But when I was first starting out just as a student and a hobbyist, I did not publish my work online. And I really regret that. But no one told me how. I didn't know itch.io was a thing. I wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self to, just put everything online. Because that's, you shouldn't get bogged down by fears of, how incomplete your games are, how buggy they are, whatever it is. Because no game is ever finished. We all want to work on our games forever, generally. Every AAA game wasn't ever really finished when they released it. It was just, they ran out of time, and that was the release date, and they just had to wrap it up as best they could. It's always true. And so just I really recommend that everyone publish basically everything you ever do. No matter how small, how buggy, how incomplete, whether it's a prototype or a full game, you should publish it online to a site like itch.io. There's also GameJolt and some other sites, although Itch is definitely the biggest as of now. When you publish your work, it's really good because it's teaching you, again, that skill of shipping, which is the most important thing. If you're going to work at a game company, they want to see how many games have you shipped, which means just, how many games have you published online, whether you're selling it or not. You just put it out there for other people to play with. But it's really great because it's very satisfying. It makes you much happier when you get to finish games, because then you feel it's a tangible milestone. It's a tangible metric of progression in your game development and in your skills. And it also lets other people play your games, obviously, and so they can give feedback. People, of course, are afraid of negative feedback and criticism, although it really shouldn't be, and building a thick skin is very important if you're going to work in any creative field or anything that's remotely related to the internet. You need a really thick skin, so you might as well start practicing that as soon as you can. Although actually, in my experience at least, and of my friends that I people I see on itch.io, the itch.io commenters are actually very, very nice people. They tend to not flame on your games too hard. Whereas, if you publish something to Steam or the App Store, you will get a lot of rather ragey reviews, but definitely to something like itch.io, everyone's generally pretty positive and is giving really good feedback and critique, which can be very motivating and inspiring. And I really love to do that, to play people's games on itch.io, and I would record like videos of the gameplay and kind of talk about my experience as I play it for the first time on my YouTube channel. And that's a really fun experience for me, but the main reason why I do that is because it's really good for the developers, just kind of giving them my attention and feedback and encouragement. And I literally get messages on Discord like every other week or so where someone tells me that they didn't quit on game development because of something that I said within a video or a comment. And that's just like the best feeling in the world. And I really want everyone else to do that so they can experience that same thing. And so we have more people sticking with game development, because if you just never publish your work, you just, it's really impossible to keep up motivation, truly, because you're not getting that experience from other people. I know I tend to go on tangents. The original question was how long did it take for me personally to publish something, I believe. I did share my first few games. When I first started in game development, I was very young, and I would make a game like every week or so once I really got into the swing of things. There was a long period where I only had like one project for a long time, and I definitely regret that. I should have done small weekly games right away. But again, I was learning for the first time, so I don't blame myself. And while I did show those games to like my friends and my peers, and they'd get played by like 20 people, and sometimes would get really popular and would get shared around, I never published them to itch.io. I really only started publishing stuff to Itch a couple, like 2 or 3 years ago now. I think it was I published like 1 or 2 things before I got to Las Vegas, which I moved to Vegas in late 2017, so about 3 years ago. And it was only when I really got to Vegas that I really got into itch.io and publishing all my work online, which has been the best experience ever. And I'm so happy I did that. Wish I could have done that earlier, but no one told me to. But other than that, like the work I did up in Washington state in the U.S., where I'm mainly from, Washington, which is kind of the video game capital of the world, which is why I got into game development originally, is because I lived in Washington. And, we have my old university, Digipen Institute of Technology there in Redmond, and then all the game companies, Microsoft and Valve and Big Fish and Amazon, like a huge portion of the U.S. game companies are in Washington state. And when I was doing work there, all the work I was doing was proprietary, an NDA. That's a very common thing in the game industry. It's all protected by NDA. So unfortunately, none of the work I really did up in Washington in the video game industry is online available because the projects were stuck in development hell or they got canceled or whatever else, which is super, super common. It's very, very common if you're going to work in the game industry and you're not running an indie game where you're in control of it. It's very common that your work is never really going to see the light of day, or at least not be seen for like 5 years at a time, which really sucks. And that's, again, why I really, really recommend that people make these kind of small games for fun as a hobby, even on top of their normal professional work, because it gives a good bit of reprieve, a good break from your main work, as my work is. All the work I do for the UNLV Center for Gaming Innovation is all super NDA, private, protected, because we're developing patents. So I can really only talk about one of the games after we get the patent on it, which is usually a multi-year process. And so it's really good to be able to publish works to itch.io quickly, because then I can still be involved within the game development community, still refine my skills and get kind of exposure and that's not the right word. Just talk to different people, talk to other developers and players, and get feedback and that kind of thing.
Yep. So the next question is, do you feel that making regular games every week has improved your quality of work in casino games?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Because as I said, with those bigger projects, you can just kind of get into a funk where you're just kind of spinning your wheels. You're just constantly doing the same thing. Especially if you're having to like redo your previous work because your skills have improved, as I talked about. It can really get stuck there. And especially with the work I do with the CGI, it's mainly very isolated. Like I just have my one friend Katie, who does art for my project sometimes, and then my boss. And otherwise, it's just kind of me working on the projects alone for a really long time, due to the nature of the job, which is, again, it's kind of an odd, unique position. And so being able to practice my game development and share it online and get that kind of feedback and review, and again, just kind of, it's like sharpening, a knife. It's just kind of keeping me on edge and letting me experiment with other game genres, which has been really, really great, actually. I have a big list where I wrote down like a bunch of game genres that I've never made a game in before. And so I sometimes just pull from that list and then get to cross it off afterwards, which, again, super satisfying, really, really great practice. And making that diversity of games and learning new engines and tools by making these kind of weekly games on itch.io through Trijam or otherwise has been really, really fantastic for me personally and professionally. I can't talk about it too much, but I currently work at the UNLV Center for Gaming Innovation, but I'm currently negotiating a new position. And I will say, as I mentioned, that my portfolio that I've accrued because of itch.io and Trijam is really helping me. That was one of the big reasons why the CTO was really interested in me for this new job, which, again, is not a guarantee I'll get that. It's still in the works, and we're in a really bad time for getting new jobs, unfortunately, due to the world economy. But hopefully that'll work out, and if it works out, it's mainly going to be because of the weekly games that I've been doing.
Yep. So the next question, you already partly answered it, but still, what next? So what after releasing the game? marketing their games and earn money from them and learn that way? Or do you think that skill is not needed and just drop the game on itch.io?
No, that's absolutely needed. Marketing is really, really important. I give game dev talks a lot, and I really like to talk about marketing and financing. That's a whole other discussion. I have like an hour-long presentation on marketing and financing, which is a very complicated topic. And again, I'm not with this kind of game education stuff, or just education in general. It's always kind of funky because we all have imposter syndrome, so I don't feel like I'm the biggest expert on like marketing and stuff, because I had like one marketing related job, but I'm not like 20 years experienced marketer, right? But education, it's mainly about just kind of knowing more than the people you're speaking to, which we all do. Like everyone, we're all unique. We all have our own backgrounds and skill sets. So I feel like pretty much everyone has something to offer and something they can teach to their peers, whether it's a very niche topic or not. But yeah, for marketing, for a game that you're selling for money, that is a very important skill and a very long process, something that you don't want to save until the end of a game's dev cycle. It's a very, very common thing with people that get into game development because they like games. It's not because they like being an entrepreneur or because they like marketing, right? And so a lot of indie game developers really struggle with marketing. And so, yeah, that's a skill you definitely have to refine with practice, but also just with study. There are a lot of great resources online. Throughout the presentation, I have different silly images from different sources that I like. One YouTube channel, a friend of mine, Tim Ruswick, who runs the Game Dev Underground YouTube channel. He's based out in the US as well. He used to be a marketer. He ran a marketing company, and now he's doing indie games and been just running this game development related channel. He has a lot of great material on game marketing. Although, again, he will say that, even though he did marketing for X amount of years and literally founded and ran a very successful marketing company, he will say he doesn't feel like a super expert on marketing, because no one really is, honestly. A lot of entrepreneurship and success in selling a game is unfortunately just based on luck and, right place at the right time kind of thing. Doesn't mean you just should sit back and not try. Of course not. You create your own luck. You just give yourself more opportunities to get lucky, right? That's kind of the basis for a lot of skills and fields, but certainly for marketing a product. I really recommend Tim Ruswick's channel, Game Dev Underground, for learning more about game marketing. There's also Mike Rose. Okay, I was spacing on his name for a moment. Mike Rose, who founded and runs No More Robots, which is a rather new game publishing company. He is really great at his job. He's very, very good at game marketing. He published Descenders and several other games since that. They're slipping my mind. But he has many very good talks on marketing that he gave to GDC. And those talks are available online for free on the GDC YouTube channel. Not all of the GDC talks are available for free. They keep the majority locked away in their vault so that you have to pay a subscription to. But they have a lot of good content on just the GDC YouTube page. And so definitely really, really recommend Mike Rose's talks in particular. I'm a huge fan of his work. And there are so many other resources. And again, I love to talk about game marketing and financing, but it's definitely its own very long discussion. So I'll nip it in the bud there unless there's another very specific question.
Well, thank you. And can people reach you out and ask you questions maybe?
Yes, absolutely. I had it in the last slide. I can maybe screen share that again.
Yeah, well,
yes. Yeah, here.
Your contact information.
Yeah. Yeah. So here, that's my personal Discord handle, which I give out my kind of personal contact info pretty liberally, just because it's easy to find anyone. So like, why gate it? If someone really wants your email address, they're able to find it no matter what. But yeah, people are absolutely free to message me privately on Discord or message me on Twitter. You can send me an email. I get an email from from someone on itch.io or like a YouTube fan or something, like every few weeks, and then this isn't a pretty link because we don't have a vanity URL, but this is the link for the Trijam Discord, which I run. I don't run the Trijams themselves. It's just a community Discord, which I created because the Rock Knight said that they would support me in doing that. And yeah, I'm very active on there, and people feel free to reach out to me there or personally with DMs or on Twitter or email. Any or all of the above is perfectly fine.
So, yep, thanks for really encouraging and really good presentation. I was really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, probably in some other game dev meetups. I hope so.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot to learn from you. So, thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks.